Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for March 21st, 2018. On today's show, we'll be talking about film news, followed by a mailbag segment discussing if all the big movie releases should be required viewing for film bloggers. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Okay, before we get into our mailbag segment, we do have a bit of film news, and that is the Pacific Rim 2, Pacific Rim Uprising reviews have hit the web. So we have the early buzz. Ben, I know you've seen the film. Is it any good?
I would say that it's terrible, guys. I despised this movie. I was not a fan of it at all. And I mean, look, I think...
Wait a second. Were you a fan of the first film?
Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to get into. I think the first movie is fine. It's like... it's a little goofy, but you can tell that there's some real... feeling to it. There's some real effort being put in. This one just feels very surface level, and there's nothing there. It's just all smash and grab nonsense, and then but not even in a fun way. That's the thing. It's like I was sort of dreading this movie, but I went into it like, okay, maybe at least if the action is good, then I'll be pleased with this whole thing. Like, that's a pretty low bar, and I personally did not feel like it cleared that bar. But the early buzz online seems to disagree with me for the most part. I think a lot of people agree that the first half is pretty bad. It's pretty boring, and then it gets really crazy when the actual action starts to kick in with all the kaiju Jaeger fights that happen as this movie ramps up. And I guess everyone else was more entertained with that aspect of the movie than I was, because we wrote a whole article about the early buzz on this movie, and like Jordan Hoffman says, the first half of Pacific Rim 2 is worse than visiting the dentist. The second half is literally the best thing that has happened to me in weeks. And I'm like, wow, if that's the best thing that's happened to you in weeks, man, I don't know. But yeah, there are a lot of people who sort of echo that sentiment.
I love Angie Hahn's, what she says is...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
She says, you know that scene in every party movie where the main characters take drugs and they go from, this is lame and I don't feel anything, to, I don't even know how to say that out loud.
I'll give it a shot. To, yes, holy shit.
That's the experience of watching Pacific Rim Uprising. Now, I love Angie, but she also loved Wrinkle in Time. Just saying.
She also loves Batman vs. Superman. So Angie's lovely. You guys know she's a former Slash filmer. But I like Angie because she sometimes has very different opinions and runs away from the pack. So take that with the Angie Hahn-sized grain of salt.
The one good thing about this movie, I will say, is John Boyega. He is really terrific and just oozes charisma the entire time, and he makes this thing watchable just by himself from sheer force of will. It's like one of those examples that I want to point to when everybody says movie stars aren't a thing anymore. It's like, look at John Boyega in this movie and imagine somebody else in this role, and imagine how terrible it would be without him there. And it's already pretty bad as it is, I think. But I don't know. I'm interested for some of you guys to see it, to either corroborate my views or tell me that I'm crazy and not having enough fun with these robots smashing each other, because I really wanted to have fun with this one, guys, but there's just something about it I couldn't make it work.
Well,
I do want to say that Dalen Rowell, one of our freelancers, saw it last night, and she grew up watching mecha anime, and she says that it reminded her so much of like the obscure, weird, cartoony anime she used to watch when she was a kid. So if that's the thing that appeals to you, I think it may be a movie for that audience, not necessarily for everybody, but for people who already have that love inside of them.
I found some enjoyment even in Justice League, which was critically destroyed. So I'm hoping for the best here, although it seems like Guillermo del Toro not being involved, I don't know. As much of what I liked about the first Pacific Rim was kind of the Guillermo del Toro weirdness of the take on that in the world building. Ben, you have an interview with John Boyega, who you mentioned, which I will link in the show notes, and we will play on a future episode of Slash Film Daily if you want to hear it for yourself. But let's get into the mailbag. And last week, Don E. wrote in that he heard for the second time one of our critics, quote unquote, talk about a movie they haven't seen and never will. The first being Bright on Netflix because you didn't want to contribute to the Netflix numbers that have watched the film, and the second being the original Fantastic Beasts, which Ben said he didn't see because he thought the trailers looked cheesy. I realize you can't see every movie that comes out. There's just not enough time to do so. But both of those movies are certainly not the worst or obscure movies out there. Isn't it your whole job to criticize movies? That can't be done if you don't see them. I mean, it sucks to walk out of a movie theater or turn off the TV, but at least give it a shot. It's very puzzling that you guys judge stuff without seeing it. I love your show and hope you will address the issue. Thanks for your time. Now, I don't know. I guess where do we start with this question? Because I think it actually is an interesting question. You know, we are not. I don't think anybody on this podcast would any of you consider yourself a film critic primarily?
No, I don't. I don't write reviews very often. I think cultural commentator sounds highfalutin, but I feel like that's more of what we do most of the time.
I'd like to think of myself as a film critic, but I'm not snobby about it. At least I hope not.
Makes sense, Chris, because you do a lot of reviews for the site, so that's more sort of in line with what the traditional job title is, I guess.
Right.
But even what Chris does is, I would say the majority of the work you do in writing about film is not film reviews, correct?
I mean, no, yeah, I definitely do a lot more other stuff than film criticism, yeah.
And I think the evolution of film criticism, there used to be like these newspapers that would employ film critics like Roger Ebert, and their entire job was just to see movies and write reviews of movies. And sadly, those jobs are becoming few and far between. Most of the critics that you read that write reviews generally are doing some other work. Maybe they're writing, features on older films or whatnot. Like there's rarely a film critic job available at many of these outlets. But okay, so I guess let's start off here. What is, now that we've established, aside from Chris, we're not film critics, what is the requirement for us on as film, or what did you call us, Jacob?
Cultural commentators is my highfalutin word.
I'm just going to call us film bloggers or pop culture bloggers or something. I know people hate the word bloggers. I don't know. I've always embraced it. Our tagline of the site is blogging the real world. So, okay, so us as film bloggers or pop culture bloggers, what is our responsibility to see new releases? Jacob.
This is an interesting question for me because a year and a half ago, I would have been seeing everything because I was full-time freelance and it was sort of out pounding the pavement, trying to get work, trying to find jobs, trying to get everything rolling, trying to say, I've seen everything, hire me, I can write about this, that, and everything. But now that I've moved into an editorial position at Slash Film, I don't see as much as I used to, and I'm allowed to be pickier because I'm allowed to go out there and find people who are seeing everything and get them to write about it for us, and I can concentrate on the things that interest me and things that I'm passionate about. And this is where it gets interesting because I don't think a critic or a writer should be forced to see everything. I think they should have their education in place. I think they should see the classics. I think that they should stay on top of the big trends. But I think if they skip a blockbuster or two because it does not appeal them, because it does not interest them, because it does not instir or fulfill a passion in them, then that's perfectly okay. I think the worst film criticism is when people write about a movie that is just of so little interest in them, they can't even muster up the enthusiasm to give it the time of day. So I think it's more important in this day and age for writers to champion the things they love rather than drag on the things they have no interest in. I know for Bright being an example that was brought up in the email, I had no interest in Bright. Every single writer I spoke to did not like it. So I could either subject myself to it and maybe write about it and have negative things to say, or I could spend that time watching things that I'm legitimately interested in, things that make me happy, excited, and thrilled about movies and about TV, and spend that time in that direction. So that's my answer, but yeah. I'm curious what you guys think.
No, I think one of the points you bring up is one of the points I always bring up when we're talking about the difference between film critics and the general movie watching public, and that is the general movie watching public invests their money in movies they want to see, movies that they have an interest in. And people that write about film and film critics, in the old sense of things, would see, all the new releases, despite if they had any interest in that movie genre or filmmaker, actor. Do you know what I mean? They would be forced to see the Emoji Movie, even though they had no interest in seeing the Emoji Movie. And I think the result of that is you see a lot of that is where you see the biggest divide, I think, between audiences and critics, is people getting paid to see things that they would never in their right mind ever be interested in seeing, and people reading them expecting a result other than they totally destroy it. So I don't know. I agree with what you're saying, Jacob, that as people, we all love movies and TV. And I think our job to write about movies and TV, we should not force ourselves to watch stuff that we don't think we would enjoy. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this? Because this kind of spurred from your comment that you did not want to watch Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really care for the Harry Potter films that much, so part of it was just I wasn't really thrilled about the idea of diving into another 7 movies or whatever this is ultimately going to end up being, where, I didn't necessarily appreciate the foundation that was already set there. The email says it's very puzzling to me that you guys judge stuff without seeing it, and I think, for me anyway, I'm trying my best not to judge things without seeing it. I won't write an article that pretends to, speak with any sort of level of authority on a movie that I haven't seen, because it doesn't make any sense. You can, there are so many places on the internet where you can read somebody who has seen it and can properly contextualize things. And I think,
and it should be noted that there's a difference between you having an opinion on a movie you haven't seen and you having an opinion on the marketing and the,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think, what Jacob said was absolutely true. And we also, skipping 1 or 2 blockbusters or something like that does not necessarily mean that you don't have a grasp of the trends at large, which is a big part of what we write about on the site all the time, just sort of taking a macro view of what Hollywood is doing. So I feel like you don't necessarily have to see every single thing to be able to speak authoritatively on that subject, which is something that we do all the time. But Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Ben,
and it should be said, out of all of us, Chris is the person that probably sees the most movies every year. I think you've said, last year you saw 400 or 500 movies or something?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could see more, honestly. But, the problem is if you want to criticize a movie by actually writing a review without having seen the movie, then yes, that is absolutely a problem. No one should do that. And there are people who write whole editorials and they start off by saying, now, I haven't seen this movie yet, and the minute I see that, I instantly hit the X, because I don't really give a shit about what you think about a movie if you haven't seen it yet. But that said, if you're criticizing the marketing, or a preconceived notion, Bright is a David Ayer film, and David Ayer hasn't made a good film maybe ever. So I think it's okay to take an assumption and say this probably isn't good. That said, if I ever see Bright and I think it's a good movie, I'll be the first one to admit, hey, you know what? This movie actually is pretty good. But I'll give a specific example. The recent Power Rangers film. I did not see that in theaters. I thought, what the hell is the point of this movie? I have no interest in this. I have no nostalgia built up for the Power Rangers. It looked dumb. It's now streaming on Amazon Prime. I watched it for the streaming column I write for Slash Film, and I actually really enjoyed it. I won't call it a good movie, but it was an entertaining film, and I said that in my write-up for the streaming column. This is a surprisingly entertaining movie. So, I think if there's a difference between saying that doesn't really look good to me, I probably won't see it, and actually seeing something and being like, oh, you know what, that actually is good. But to assume that you can't voice an opinion on something, without ever having seen it, that just seems a little silly to me. The opinion is on the marketing. It's on how you think it's going to turn out. But the problem is when you stick that opinion no matter what, and you say, this is bad no matter what anyone says.
I've always looked at Slash Film to be more about the excitement of getting excited for movies. Much of what we do is we write about, the development process of, there's a script being written of this movie, a director gets cast, here's the casting for the movie, here's the writer, here's the first trailer of what we thought, let's break down the first trailer. We're kind of going along that process, and Slash Film started in 2005, so at this point we have almost 13 years of the site, and there are projects that we're still talking about that have been in development for those 13 years that I've been writing about for 12 or 13 years now, and it's interesting to go through that process, but I've never not going to say we're not about reviews. We do reviews a lot. We do features and top 10 lists. The Slash Filmcast as a podcast is more of the review podcast side of the Slash Film podcast empire. Slash Film Daily, I think, is more of an extension of the news side of the site. Not that we don't do reviews here. Obviously, Ben was just talking about his thoughts on Pacific Rim 2, and we do these water cooler segments where we talk about what we've been watching. But I don't think we would ever do a water cooler segment about something we haven't seen. but I think it's fair game to talk about the marketing. Jacob, now, you are the managing editor of Slash Film. So Don in his letter kind of brings up kind of a view on film criticism of we should be covering everything that's kind of a major release, and and you being a managing editor of the site as a whole, is that something that should be something we should strive to do, or should we be striving to write about the stuff we're interested in and our readers are interested in primarily?
This is something I think about every single day, and ever since I became managing editor, our readers and listeners may know there's been a lot more voices on the site, a lot of different writers who come in on a freelance basis to cover movies for us, write features for us, write reviews. For example, Karen Hahn and Josh Spiegel, two writers I adore, whose work is lovely, write regular reviews for us. And that's because our jobs don't always make it easy for us to review everything, don't make it easy for us to see everything. But I have a email list of an incredibly diverse army of writers. And I say, okay, here's a movie that's coming out. It's a big deal. No one on the staff is excited about it. I'll send an email and say, hey, who is excited? Because I'd much rather have a writer who is pumped for a movie, who says, this is up my alley, I dig this, I want to write about this, and shoveled off to a staff writer who's going to sigh and say, okay, I'll force something out. So my whole thing has always been, why make Ben write about Harry Potter when HT, who's not on the podcast today, can write about it instead? And when HT is super excited about the new Fantastic Beasts movie, and she puts that in her trailer breakdown, why not have Lindsay Romaine, one of our other freelance writers, write an article about why, as a longtime Harry Potter fan, she's so bummed out by the new movies. So I am constantly thinking about, okay, who has seen what, who likes what, who is a fan of something, and who's a fan who's disappointed. This is I'd say about 75% of my day is trying to figure out how I can present content and represent upcoming movies and coverage in ways so that the best foot forward is there, so that the right writer is on the correct article and the right freelancer is taking the right approach to the right material. And it's a big job, and I take it very seriously. And I understand maybe listening to the podcast or only reading certain writers may give that point of view, but I think as a whole, our site does a really good job of covering every angle and every major movie. like I said, I'm open to criticism, and I'm taking this email like very seriously. But I really do feel
I don't
like
think
we need to do this.
Yeah, I don't think this is like our response saying you're wrong. I think this is us having a discussion about this email, a serious discussion. I do think a lot of these websites you go onto, in these forums you go onto, and even like social media you go onto, you are seeing your opinion reflected back on you by other like-minded people. And one of the things I love that Jacob has kind of brought to the site since becoming managing editor is we now have a hugely more diverse group of freelancers writing for the site. A couple weeks ago, it was International Women's Day, and I wrote this tweet, thanking all the women that make Slash Film possible, and I could barely fit all the Twitter names in one tweet, and that's all Jacob's doing, and I think, and not to be like patting ourselves on the back or whatever, but like I think, part of what we're trying to do is not just reflect your opinion back on you. We have a lot of people of the opposite sex. We have a lot of people of color. We have, pieces that are like soapboxes and, rants and unpopular opinions that, someone writing about a movie that a lot of people don't love, that they love, and writing about a movie that a lot of people love, that they hate. And I kind of love that we're, challenging our audience in some way.
Yeah, I guess
for sure.
To jump on real quick, and then I'll let Ben have the floor again. I guess to tie what Peter just said back to the original email, it's the idea that, we won't see, Ben won't see Fantastic Beasts, or we won't see Bright, but that doesn't mean that somebody on Slash Film won't see it and won't write about it. And like I said, that's important to us. So even if in the podcast we dismiss it, the site itself won't dismiss it, and we think that's more important than having all of us be up to date on that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. And I probably still won't watch Bright, but I think ultimately I will eventually sit down and watch Fantastic Beasts, just because it is going to be a cultural force for so many years, whether I like it or not. And yeah, I probably, just to make it easier for myself and for my fellow staff members and stuff, like I feel like it's probably something I should do just so I can write about the next casting development for the third movie in the franchise or whatever, and I don't have to push that off to HT because she might be busy writing about something else that she loves. But yeah, I think, I like to think that we have an open enough policy that the writers on the site are able to write about the things that they care about, and that's part of what makes Slash Film so great, I think. So I don't know what else more needs to be said than that.
And I think that's well said. I do know a lot of other sites are way more into, assignments, of people getting assignments to write about certain things that they might not necessarily love or know about. I'm not sure how much we've talked about this in the past, but our Slash Film group of our normal staff that writes about film news and stuff, we pick the assignments based on what we like and what we know about. Sometimes there's no one else around that that likes a certain thing, then someone has to write about it because it's big news. But it is kind of a assignment by the writer themselves. So anyways, I think I would like to hear from Chris, see if he has any closing thoughts on this.
I mean, yeah, I just want to, reiterate what I said already, where, it's, I understand the point of this letter. I don't even disagree with it 100%. But I still think there's a fine line between criticizing marketing versus criticizing the film itself. And, like I said, if I criticize a film before I see it, and then I see it and it turns out to be good, I will be the very first person to admit that. And I also want to state that I never go into a movie wanting it to be bad. And I feel like any critic who does that is doing the job wrong. Like, I may have grumbled about, Justice League before seeing it, but when I go to the theater, when I sit down to watch that movie, my fingers are crossed that it's going to turn out to be a good movie. Because if it's not a good movie, it's going to be painful. I'm going to be sitting there for 2.5 hours not enjoying it. There's nothing I want more than to enjoy a film I'm about to see. So if it turns out to be bad, I'm not going to, lie to myself and be like, well, that wasn't too bad, but I'm going to be, I want honesty is what I guess I'm saying. When I go to a movie, I want it to be good, but if it's not good, I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to come out of the film and say, that was okay. If a movie sucks, I'm going to say it sucks, but I don't go into a movie hoping it fails. And I feel like anyone who does do that, they're becoming like, the critic in Birdman, where they're just out to destroy a film. And I don't think anyone should approach art like that.
And we shouldn't say that nobody doesn't do that, because there probably are people out there. We've talked about with the Rotten Tomatoes bit of kind of like these people that are trying to take the adverse opinion just to spike the rating or to get attention.
Let me rephrase. I don't think anyone who takes the job seriously does that. I feel like if you are doing that, you're just a jerk. You don't actually care about being a film critic. You're just trying to start something. But I think anyone who takes this job seriously, they approach a film in a serious way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anybody that sees a movie with me at a screening at Sundance, and this is a practice that happened at Sundance. It's funny that you mentioned, you hope that something's good. Like before, when the lights are starting to go down and the picture goes up with the logo, if you look over at me, you'll see me put my hands up together and say, like as if I'm praying, and say, please be good. And I will do this with every movie. Like, I literally do this. My girlfriend hates me for doing it. But like, every movie I go see, I want to be my new favorite movie. And, even if I'm suspecting that will not be the case. But yeah. Jacob, do you have any final thoughts on this?
I agree with Chris.
Okay, so I think that leads us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. Where can people find more of your work online, Chris?
I'm at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413. Drop me a line.
Ben, where can people find you?
You can find me at slashfilm.com. I want to pimp a video that I made. I talked about on the podcast earlier this week. I went to the Ready Player One experience, and I cut together a video of that. So check that out. You can find it at slashfilm.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Ben Pearson.
Jacob, where can people find you?
I'm on slashfilm.com every single day, and I'm on Twitter at Jacob S. Hall. And since Ben pimped something, I'm going to pimp our new column starting tomorrow. Our own Rob Hunter is being forced by me and Peter to watch direct-to-video sequels to theatrically released movies and write about them. So look for that starting tomorrow.
That is very cool. You can find me at slashfilm.com, and you can find the Pacific Rim reviews, as well as the Ready Player One video that Ben talked about, and his Boyega interview, linked in the show notes. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and television, as well as deeper dives into the great features on slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to Slash Film Daily on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please send your email to Peter at slashfilm.com. It could appear in the mailbag, just like Dawn's email did today. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.